Okay, I think we can start now. So, hello everyone. Thank you for attending this webinar that will give you an overview of ISO 14001 implementation steps. My name is Carlos Pereira da Cruz, and I'm an author at �奧𝗲𝗴𝗶𝘀. I do quite a lot of ISO 14001 consulting and training. Still, I also audit as lead auditor. So today I will share my thoughts about implementing ISO 14001. My presentation will be about 40 minutes long, followed by a 20-minute question and answer session. If you have a question, feel free to ask during my presentation instead of waiting for the Q&A session. Of course, I'll also address any remaining questions during that time. We'll later send you an email with a link to the recording of this webinar and to the list of articles mentioned. Okay, so let's start here with this introduction. So in this webinar, we will gain the knowledge needed to implement ISO 14001 effectively, saving time and resources. We'll talk about step-by-step guidance on ISO 14001 implementation, overcoming challenges and best practices. Well, I won't cover the entire standard due to time constraints, but I'll focus on what I think are the most important topics, okay? This webinar is particularly dedicated to ISO 14001 professionals, including environmental managers, auditors, consultants, and implementation teams. And this is the agenda for today. So we'll discuss the following topics. So what are the main bottlenecks in an implementation project? How can you speed up an implementation project? How can you prepare yourself and your organization for the implementation? And then there's here kind of mix between this preparation and the steps. What steps should be considered during ISO 14001 implementation? And then at the end, we'll have what are the biggest challenges in ISO 14001 implementation based on the questions that I've received before this webinar. Okay, so let's go. Bottlenecks in the implementation project. So here's a list of the most common bottlenecks in ISO 14001 EMS implementation. So weak leadership, ownership. So the EMS seems as a bolt-on. So top management signs the policy, but doesn't integrate the EMS with business goals. So priorities, resources, and decisions don't line up. So to avoid these, or to as a countermeasure, make a clear business case. So what are the risks, costs, revenue, access to tenders in some cases, appoint a senior sponsor for the implementation, tie objectives to corporate KPIs and budgets, and put the EMS performance on the management review or on the board agenda. So I leave here a link for an article that you can check later. So how to budget an ISO 14001 implementation project, okay? Now, second bottleneck, identifying and keeping up with compliance obligations. So legal registers are incomplete or static. That happens a lot. Sites and contractors aren't covered. Happens also. So to act correctly, so build a maintained compliance register. Okay, define owners and verify compliance through periodic checks and internal audits before certification. It's not easy, okay, but yeah. Aspects and impacts then narrowly. So organizations focus only on on-site emissions or waste, and miss upstream, so miss the life cycle, so miss suppliers and materials, and downstream, so the use and end-of-life impacts. So this is consistently reported as one of the hardest parts of ISO 14001. So use a life cycle perspective method. So go from procurement, design, manufacture, delivery, use, and end of life. So include outsourced processes, contractors, define significance criteria, and control what you can influence. Another bottleneck is over-documentation. So organizations create procedures that people don't use. Records don't evidence performance. So Keep documents lean and process-based. Automate record keeping where sensible, and design forms that capture performance evidence, so like targets and trends. So over documentation, it's very common. Then comes insufficient competence, training, and engagement. So employees and contractors don't know their role in controls. So the EMS sits in one department, typical, okay? So to avoid this, run role-based training and toolbox talks. Maintain a competence matrix. Brief contractors and embed EMS responsibilities in job descriptions, okay? Now, resources and time underestimated, another problem. So lack of time, lack of people, lack of tools slows implementation and weakens control of changes. So build a realistic plan with milestones. Assign process owners and phase rollout. Consider external support for gap analysis and internal audit readiness. In one or two slides, I will speak about thinking first before starting acting. So yeah, before wanting to do things right away. So next one, weak monitoring, metrics, and calibration. So indicators don't reflect significant aspects. Monitoring equipment and records are inconsistent. So to avoid these, define a small set of KPIs tied to significant aspects and objectives like energy, water, waste, emissions. So relevant to your environmental assessment, okay? Ensure calibrated equipment and trend results for review. Now, we have here a question from Mehul Kumar. So how do we know that the clause needs a mandatory procedure, or this because of the over documentation? So ISO 14001 2015 no longer prescribes mandatory procedures, okay? Instead, it requires documented information where necessary to ensure effective control of processes, okay? So it's up to you to decide if you need any procedures, particularly regarding clause 8.1, about the 8.1 and 8.2, so about the emergency and about the operational control. So if a clause demands evidence of control or consistency, you must maintain documentation that fulfills this need. So, but the format is flexible. You can use procedures, flowcharts, IT systems, whatever, what best suits you, okay? So bottlenecks in implementation project. Now, how can you speed up the implementation? Okay, so secure strong management commitment. So without leadership support, the project slows down or stalls. So with commitment, resources, visibility, and decision-making speed up. And this is really, really true, okay? So show the business case, cost savings, risk reduction, market access, customer trust. Use real examples of financial and reputational benefits. Okay, start with a gap analysis. Determine exactly what is missing. So effort is focused on critical areas instead of wasting time on what's already working. So I leave here a link for our ISO 14001 gap analysis tool. Okay, it's a free tool. You can use it. Now comes what I was saying before about this think slow, act fast. This is not from my authorship. This is from an author that I like a lot. Think slow, act fast. So spend more time at the beginning, really thinking, okay, why are we doing this? What's the best way? What could go wrong with implementation? What are the alternatives? So once the plan is solid, then you can act quickly and confidently because you already know where you're going. It's like thinking all the implementation, okay, even before starting, okay, in actual starting implementing things. No, you think about all those things. So think slow and then to be able to act fast later. Now, consider external help. So if an organization lacks internal expertise or time, external consultants and experts can bring ready-made experience. They can bring shortcuts on aspect impact assessment, and tested methods for building compliance registers and lifecycle perspectives. Normally, projects without experienced support take longer and risk rework. Okay. Now comes what? External training and awareness packages. So outsources training is faster than developing material from scratch. Yeah. External trainers can deliver concise, role-based sessions to operators and managers. And you can use toolkits and pre-written documentation. So ready-to-use templates like our ISO 14001 toolkit, get weeks or even months of documentation work, and ensure alignment with auditors' expectations. And implement in small PDCA cycles. So a big bang approach, okay, overwhelms people and delays results. So quick plan, do, check, act cycles deliver results faster. So start with one or two significant aspects like waste or energy. Expand step by step, each cycle building evidence for certification. So I don't know if you know this standard, ISO 14005, but this standard proposes a stage maturity-based path to a full ISO 14001 EMS. Okay, you start narrow, one or two significant aspects, like waste, for example, and expand scope step by step. So every phase runs a full plan, do, check, act loop. So plan controls and metrics, implement them, monitor, measure, then adjust and standardize before widening the scope. So each cycle generates objective evidence, documented information, records, KPIs. And this kind of artifacts, okay, accumulate until you meet all ISO 14001 requirements and are ready for certification. Now, we have a question here from Mo. Mo asked, is it possible to integrate ISO 14001 with the current ISO 9001? Absolutely. So both standards, okay, share the same high-level structure, the famous Annex SL. So making integration straightforward, okay? So you can combine policies, objectives, internal audits, management reviews, and corrective actions, for example, to manage quality and environment under a single system, okay? So how can you speed up implementation? Now, preparation. So how do you prepare for ISO 14001 implementation? Let's break it down. So the first step is to build a business case to secure top management commitment. Okay, we already spoke about this in previous slides, but it's really, really important to have top management on our side, to be sure that we have a right sponsor, we have the resources, okay? Next, clearly define the scope of your EMS. This means setting the boundaries, which sites, which activities and processes are covered. A precise scope avoids confusion and later rework. In parallel, determine interested parties and their requirements. So from regulators and customers to employees and local communities, ISO 14001 requires you to understand not only the legal context, but also expectations that can influence your EMS. Then move on to, very important, to mapping environmental aspects and legal obligations. Okay, this is the foundation. I'll say that almost, not everything, but almost everything comes from here, okay? What are your significant environmental impacts? And which laws and permits apply? So this step will guide the policy, the objectives, and controls you need to implement. So remember clause 5.2a, okay, of ISO 14001 says something like, is appropriate to the purpose and context of the organization, including the nature and scale of environmental impacts of its activities, products, and services. So even the policy, okay, is somehow related with this mapping environmental aspects, okay, and of course compliance obligations, because we have a commitment to comply with compliance obligations. Now, form the project team. So with this understanding, form the project team, assign clear responsibilities, designate an EMS coordinator, and ensure time and knowledge are allocated. Remember, the most critical resources here are people's expertise and commitment. So train people about ISO 14001 awareness, environmental aspects and impacts, compliance obligations, at least those obligations that are related with their work, And also risk-based thinking. Use formats for this training, something like workshops, awareness sessions for managers, and on-the-job coaching. And finally, perform a gap analysis and develop a phased project plan. So check what's missing, which in turn helps define milestones, responsibilities, and timelines. So break it into realistic stages. Prioritize high-risk areas and quick wins, and set milestones. This phased approach helps maintain momentum and avoids the big bang trap where everything is delayed until the big bang, and then things are not going well. Well, question here. Karen asked, is it possible to go for the implementation of ISO 14001 and not for certification? That would mean using the standard as guidance to monitor environmental impacts and performance, but not more. Yes, of course. ISO 14001 can be used solely as a framework for managing environmental aspects, impacts, and compliance obligations without pursuing certification. Certification provides external recognition, but implementation alone already drives performance improvement. We hope so, yeah. Now, let's see the steps, okay, in ISO 14001 implementation, okay? So, step number 1, get management support. I'm repeating myself, but this is really, really important. So management support is critical. Without this support, your implementation of ISO 14001 or any management system will almost certainly fail or will take ages, okay? So we need to have a good sales pitch. You need to have a good sales pitch to convince your management that ISO 14001 is a good idea. Don't forget examples of cost savings, risk mitigation, and market advantages. So highlight how ISO 14001 helps the organization meet legal requirements, avoid fines, and improve operational efficiency. Now, define the scope of the EMS. So to ensure you know the limits of what needs to be done, you need to define the scope of your EMS. It's like the fence around your EMS. This helps prevent the inclusion of areas of your business that might not have an effect on the environment. Is to avoid what project management people call the scope creep, okay? The scope is growing, and growing. We start with a scope very small, and then during the implementation, the scope is growing. And that's not a good practice. Determine context and stakeholders. So at this stage, the organization needs to look outward and inward to understand the environment in which it operates. So clause 4.1 asks you to determine the internal and external issues that could affect your environmental management system. So for example, market pressures, regulatory trends, climate risks, technological changes, or even company culture and resource constraints. Mapping these issues gives you your EMS a realistic foundation, making sure it reflects both the opportunities and challenges your organization actually faces. Okay, so clause 4.1, okay, about the issues. Clause 4.2 takes this analysis further by requiring you to determine the needs and expectations of interested parties. So this may include regulators, customers, suppliers, employees, shareholders, and the local community. Some expectations are legal obligations, okay, while others are voluntary commitments or reputational drivers. So by clarifying who your stakeholders are and what they expect from you, the EMS becomes more than a compliance tool. It becomes a way to align your environmental performance with the expectations of those who matter most to your business. So context and stakeholders or interested parties. Then comes determine aspects and compliance obligations. That really important step. So step is at the heart of the ISO 14001 implementation. So the organization must determine its environmental aspects, the way its activities, products, and service interact with the environment. And this might include emissions to air, discharges to water, waste generation, use of natural resources, or impacts on biodiversity. So each aspect is then evaluated to determine its significance, considering both normal operations and abnormal situations such as emergencies. These analyses provide the factual basis for setting objectives, operational controls, and monitoring plans. So the aspects, and then in parallel, clause 6.1.3 requires the organization to establish and maintain an up-to-date list of its compliance obligations. So these obligations go beyond legal requirements to include permits, industry standards, customer requirements, or voluntary commitments. Together, the aspects register and compliance register ensure that the EMS is not built on guesswork, but on solid understanding of the organization's real impacts and legal responsibilities. So getting this step right is essential for avoiding risks, building credibility with the stakeholders, and ensuring that future objectives are both meaningful and achievable. Okay, so sometimes I see organizations developing EMS objectives with no relationship with this environmental assessment about the aspects and impacts. So it makes no sense. Now, I leave here links for 3 articles. So how to determine the scope of the EMS according to ISO 14001. The other one is determining the context of the organization in ISO 14001. And a third one is 6 ways to deal with significant environmental aspects in your EMS. Okay. Sanjay asked, is there any easy way to understand what laws to comply with and how? Well, so clause 6.1.3 requires you to determine and have access to applicable compliance obligations, so legal and other requirements. So the easy way is to use structured tools like legal registers, governmental portals, or specialized compliance services, okay? So regular updates and evaluations of compliance in clause 9.1.2, okay, ensure you remain current and aligned with obligations. So for example, I use a service from a company where they provide me the national legislation and European legislation, any changes in national, European, and municipal, so local authorities changes. Kartika asked, how can this standard be implemented in a trading company that does not involve any production or manufacturing? Okay, so by focusing on indirect environmental aspects, things like energy consumption in office, transport, logistics, packaging choices, waste management, supplier selection, product life cycle considerations, okay? So ISO 14001 applies to any organization that interacts with the environment, not only manufacturers, okay? So like this one. So a consulting company, a consultancy can also apply to ISO 14001 implementation and certification. And then we have things like the consumption of energy, the transportation of the consultants, or things like that, waste in the offices. Yeah. Okay, so let's go to step 5. Define and implement processes and procedures. So at this step, you translate your aspects and compliance analysis into real-world control systems. So define the processes and a few well-targeted procedures needed to ensure consistent performance in line with your environmental goals. ISO 14001 requires you to focus on operational aspects and operational controls. So like clause 8.1, that directly manage significant environmental aspects and compliance obligations. So rather than over-documenting, follow a smart approach. Create procedures only for activities prone to error. Create procedures only for activities prone to error or posing environmental risk, such as wastewater handling, hazardous waste disposal, or emergency spill response, okay? This balances control with agility and avoids creating unnecessary paperwork. So once developed, ensure these are clearly assigned, communicated, and regularly reviewed, okay? Embedding them into daily work, training, and internal audits help them, make them living parts of your system rather than just documents sitting on a shelf. Okay, so one of the biggest risks at this stage is resistance to change. Employees may see new procedures as extra bureaucracy or a threat to how they've always worked. So the best way to prevent this is by involving people early in drafting and testing the procedures, explaining the purpose behind each control, and showing how these changes protect both the environment and the company. And when people understand the why and feel ownership, resistance quickly turns into engagement. Okay. Now, you'll find all the mandatory and most commonly used non-mandatory documents in our ISO 14001 Premium Toolkit. Let me show you how it looks like. Okay, so let me see. So this is the list of all the documents that we have in the ISO 14001 Premium Documentation Toolkit. Okay, so we have procedures, we have forms, we have guidelines. Yeah, so it's the list of all the documents. I will show you, for example, this one, procedure for operational control of significant environmental aspects and guidelines for wastewater and sewage management. Again, these ones here are mandatory if your organization decides that they are necessary, okay? It's up to your organization. So let's see here. We have this procedure for operational control of significant environmental aspects. So this is a Word document. So you can customize this document, make all the changes that you want, okay, to make it useful for your own organization. So we have here for example, this one, operational control hierarchy. So you have here the list of all the possibility, what you can do with your significant aspects and impact. So risk elimination, substitution, technological control, administrative controls. So, for example, what kind of actions you can do when you are developing new products or new services? Okay, what kind of in the side of the environment that we can include or we can use as an input for the development of products and service more environmental friendly. Yeah, this one here. Okay, and just one example here for the so here for clause 8.2, emergency preparedness and response plan for flooding. So if this is relevant in your organization, okay, you can use something like this. Again, this is a Word document, completely customizable. Yeah, you see here, you have here the notes or comments that can help you. Yeah. Okay. Let's go back to the presentation. No, it's not the presentation. Yes. Okay. So you can see the details of this toolkit here. So I leave here the link for the toolkit. Okay. Next one is this one. Train people and raise awareness. Okay. Training and awareness are not just ticking boxes. Okay. They're the bedrock for making your EMS real and effective. ISO 14001 clause 7.3 about the awareness requires everyone in the organization to understand your environmental policy, their roles in the EMS, and what could happen if they don't comply. This ensures that employees feel their work matters. So what is their connection, their impact with the intended results of the EMS. Also, the standard highlights that competence isn't just about following procedures, it's about knowing why your actions matter, okay? So employees need to understand both the environmental risks of their tasks and the consequences of missing control steps. That's why tailored role-based training is essential, induction sessions for new hires, hands-on training for operators, managing sensitive processes, emergency response drills, and reminders during team meetings or toolbox talks. So don't forget to keep records of these training activities. So a training activity can be like a contest, okay, where people have a kind of rally paper to find something, or to find the correct way of segregating waste, or okay, something like that, something very practical, something very that we can kind of gamify. Okay. Now, 𝗂𝗶𝗏 asked, can you take emergency action based on the risk vulnerability analysis chart? Yes. Okay, we can do that. So the risk vulnerability analysis provides input to determine like credible scenarios, okay, and appropriate response measures. Emergency action should be directly linked to the risks identified, ensuring relevance and effectiveness. Also, another question from Mabed. How do you test the emergency action plan apart from an audit checklist? Oh, yeah. You can test the emergency action plan with practical drills, okay, simulations, scenario-based exercises. You are in a room with people and you propose a problem, a challenge, and people discuss how they would manage that challenge. So testing real responses, so like fire evacuation, spill response, IT system, okay, disruption, if that has a connection with an impact within environment, ensures preparedness and provides objective evidence of effectiveness as required by clause 8.2. In one of my last implementation, ISO 14001 implementation projects, I had a problem with a company, with my client. So many months before, I started telling them, we need to do training, we need to do simulations regarding this emergency response. I didn't, yes, Carlos, next month, next week. And then they actually did that training in the week of the stage 1 audit. I was mad with them. And then they got the non-conformity, a very good non-conformity. Why? Because they did the training, but they didn't there was no evidence of evaluating the effectiveness, the result of the training. They said, okay, do you see the result of doing training at the last minute? So don't forget, provide training, provide simulation, provide these exercises, and evaluate effectiveness. Okay. So Naila asks, is there any implementation format or pro forma available for a standard case? I don't have it here, but I think we have white papers in 𝗂𝗏𝗴𝗏. We have white papers with examples of implementation in manufacturing and in service organization. I will look for them, and I will send you an email. Okay, Naila. Okay. So let me just close here. Now, I mentioned that regarding this define and implement, the implementation of processes and procedures and train people, that sometimes we have what we can say that is resistance to change. So let me show you this slide. So prevent resistance to change. So when implementing ISO 14001 or 9001 or 27001, resistance to change is natural. The key is not to ignore it, but to prepare for it. Okay. So first, always show the why. Why are we doing this? Why are we making this kind of change? Or why do we need to change? So use data. Okay. Use data, examples, or even risks that could have been avoided to prove the need for change. So I like to show the benefits of the change and what are the risks of continuing, or the risks of continuing with a situation like we have right now. So show the why. Then second, communicate openly and invite questions. Transparency builds trust. Okay. Third, listen carefully to concerns. So forces to promote the change are showing the benefits and showing that we'll remove some pain. Okay. And the other one is we need to handle the anxiety. Anxiety is something that will be an obstacle. People are afraid of, if we change this, oh, this may be So it's important. It's important to address the concerns. Okay. So don't dismiss them, acknowledge and work on solutions together. Okay. Then this makes people more engaged in implementation, in what comes next. So empower champions. So empower champions inside the organization. So people are more willing to change when they see peers leading the way. And finally, support and monitor progress. Provide training, check in regularly, and celebrate early wins. Okay, this is one thing that I like a lot. Celebrate early wins. Most of the time, people are not used to work in projects, and when we celebrate these wins, this provides some kind of makes the sense of we are able to do this, we will do it. So people become much more confident. So small successes build confidence and reduce resistance. With this approach, change stops being a threat and becomes an opportunity for improvement. So let's go back to the steps. So step number 7, select a certification body. So choosing the right certification body is a strategic decision, one that significantly influences both the credibility of your ISO 14001 certification and the quality of the audit experience. We in 𝗥𝗲𝗴𝗶𝘀 emphasize that you shouldn't base your choice purely on price, okay? Instead, consider other criteria, okay, such as accreditation. Make sure the certification body is accredited by a recognized body. Choose a certification body with a good track record and experience in your sector. An auditor familiar with your industry will conduct a more efficient and insightful audit. Check if the certification body offers integrated audits when you pursue multiple standards, okay? A locally available auditor helps avoid travel delays, offers scheduling flexibility, and reduces costs. And language proficiency and responsiveness are also important, are also key. So start your search early, okay? So I would say that in some companies, I would start searching for or defining who is my certification body around step 4, okay? After knowing what are my environmental aspects and impacts, because sometimes we have difficulties, and if we know who is going to be our certification body, we can ask them some kind of guidance, not consulting, but guidance. What is your policy regarding this, regarding that, okay? So yeah, step 8. Operate, measure, and keep records. So at this stage, it's essential to demonstrate that your EMS is not only in place, but also working effectively, okay? So ISO 14001 requires you to collect and retain records that prove your environmental processes, that your environmental processes meet established requirements. So to check if your controls are functioning and objectives are being met or adjusted as needed. So these records include evidence of training and competence, monitoring and measurement results, compliance evaluations, and actions taken for non-conformities. So additionally, monitoring and measuring equipment must be calibrated or verified so that your data is reliable, accurate, and credible during audits. So certification bodies typically require a period of operation, so often several months, during which records demonstrate consistency, compliance, and continual improvement, helping confirm that your EMS has matured and is ready for certification. So this timing depends from certification body to certification body. Now, I leave you links for 3 articles. So do you have to train your whole workforce on the ISO 14001 standard is one article. The other one is how to choose an ISO certification body, okay? And the next article is an article about ISO 27001, but I think it's relevant, it's useful for all other management systems. So 7 steps for implementing policies and procedures, okay? And now, step 9, conduct internal audits and follow up. So before the certification body audits your system, perform internal audits for each process. This allows you to ensure processes align with plans and implement necessary corrective actions for any identified issues. Conduct the management review, okay, just as management support is crucial during ISO 14000 implementation. So their ongoing involvement in the maintenance is vital, is critical. So take corrective actions, identify root causes for any issues found during measurements, internal audits, and management reviews. So corrective actions are essential for improvement and more relevant. And then we have certification. So certification of the EMS. So we have stage 1 audit. The certification body auditors review your documentation to ensure you've addressed all ISO 14001 standard requirements on paper. They'll highlight compliance areas and problems. You'll get the chance to implement corrective actions. These may occur during the initial EMS operation time frame, okay? Because it's mainly to see if your system is well designed, if all clauses of the standard are there, yeah. Then comes stage 2, certification audit, okay? This main audit involves the certification body in reviewing accumulated records from your EMS operations, including internal audits, management reviews, and corrective actions. So they'll issue a report detailing findings and whether your EMS meets ISO 14001 requirements. Corrective actions needed before certification can be recommended if major issues arise, okay? So a well thought out plan greatly assists in ISO 14001 implementation and working towards certification. Take time to plan and identify necessary resources, saving time and resources in the long run. That think slow, act fast. Yeah. Now I leave you the link for 3 articles. Number 1 is the importance of management review in the ISO 14001 process. The next one is complete guide to corrective action versus preventive action, and how to prepare for ISO 14001 certification audit. Okay. Now, okay, biggest challenges in ISO 9000. And what? Oh my God, this. So is ISO 14001 implementation. So many eyes looked to this until this, and nobody saw this. It's incredible. Yeah, risk is it's incredible. Biggest challenges in ISO 14001 implementation. So we have implementation versus certification. This is more, not so much challenges, because much more like the frequency of the questions received before this webinar. Okay. So implementation versus certification. So ISO 14001 can be used purely as a framework to improve environmental performance without seeking certification. So integration with other management systems. ISO 14001 shares the same high-level structure as ISO 9001, making integration straightforward. And applicability and practical testing. So by focusing on indirect impacts, energy use, transport, packaging, suppliers, and waste. So ISO 14001 is about environmental impacts across the value chain. So not just manufacturing. And how do you test the emergency action plan? Also, so through simulations, drills, and scenario-based exercises, these practical tests validate readiness, not just paperwork. Okay. Now, as a conclusion, not creating a plan leads to inevitable failure. So without strategic preparation, success becomes unlikely, as there's no roadmap or direction for achieving goals. And to make the whole implementation process easier and faster, you can use 𝗥𝗲𝗴𝗶𝘀 ISO 14001 Premium Documentation Toolkit. So here's the link with more details. I'll also send you now the meeting link to schedule a call with our toolkit expert. Okay, he'll explain you how toolkit works and show you any document you would like to see. Okay, so here's the link. And yeah, let's go to the Q&A. So 𝗥𝗲𝗴𝗶𝘀 published a book called the ISO 14001-2015 Companion, a straightforward guide to implementing an EMS in a small business. Perhaps it could help you and your project, okay? It is very practical, not much theory, but with the development of a case study, an example, okay? It's there. You have the link. So I invite you to check our courses that you can enroll for free. So you can watch the videos for free of our ISO 14001 Foundations course about the standard, and our lead implementer course about the steps for the implementation. Okay, before we begin with the question and answer session, I want to mention that you can also ask me anything about ISO 14001 directly. Just send me an email and I'll answer as quickly as I can. Okay, so right now I don't have any questions in the pan. So is there any questions regarding ISO 14001 implementation that you would like me to answer now? Okay, seems that, oh, one question. Sander asked, can we use the outcome of our double materiality assessment to determine our significant aspects? So, Sander, I'm not used to that kind of assessment. I would say that it can complement, okay? It can complement, because in this, it can complement, okay? So my answer is a very, very conservative answer, because I really don't know what's that, but anything that can complement a standard determination of aspects and impacts can help. Okay. Naila asked, can we get the document ISO 14001 2015? We cannot supply that document, because it's a document that people need to buy that document. Okay, you can buy directly to ISO or to your national service regarding that. Okay. Colin asks, could you give examples of meaningful KPIs for environmental performance beyond energy use or waste reduction? So energy use, waste. What other environmental aspects can we think about? So we can think about, so not energy, okay, water consumption, okay? You can think about water consumption. So is your company becoming less dependent on water consumption? So, okay, it's about waste, but like the recyclability. So the rate of recyclability, this can be another KPI. Another KPI can be about so about regarding noise reduction in your, if that's relevant for your organization. So the basis, that's why the basis is always doing the assessment and checking what are the significant aspects and impacts, and based on that, okay, make the connection. Let me see what more examples. So, for example, one of the last projects, they had consumption of fuel. So that's one of them, the reduction or the reduction of the consumption of fuel. So higher efficiency. Yeah. Okay. Things like that. Okay. But the basis is always that one. Any more questions? Okay, I think we don't have any more questions right now. So, okay, let's go to the, yeah. Okay, so I think I've covered all your questions. Yeah, so you will receive an email, okay, with a link to the recording of this webinar and the list of the links that we put in on the chat. Okay, so This 1-hour webinar was intended to give a general overview of ISO 14001 implementation steps. You can ask me anything about ISO 14001 directly by email. You can also download this presentation deck from our website or take a look at the video tutorials and documentation templates. We'll send you the email with all necessary links. Finally, if you join this webinar through Zoom, you'll see a short survey, so I would kindly ask you to spend a minute to fill it in. The recording of this presentation will be available in a few hours. You will receive a link to the recording. If you join the webinar through LinkedIn and YouTube, you will receive a link to the short survey now, and the link to the presentation will be posted on our event page in a few minutes. That will be all. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for your questions, and I hope you enjoyed this webinar.